Allison here, the Bored Housewife. Thank you so much for joining me for another week's episode of the Bored Housewife. If you've been enjoying this last month of very specific housewife content, please let me know in the comments. In general, the podcast is trying to lean a little bit more towards the housewife lifestyle, but this was definitely a little bit different. We're not talking so much directly about philosophy. Next month, I definitely want to get more into that sort of stuff, but just let me know what you guys think about this kind of content, because I can definitely throw more of it in, and not just like it be philosophical related, just like life related and stuff like that. So keep me posted, and also if you're enjoying this, please share with a friend. I'd love to build our community, and no better way to do that than word of mouth. So I would really appreciate that. You guys can also check out the link in the description and go to my social media posts, the website. There's a blog on there with a few entries. So just to continue to think and be inspired and all of that fun stuff. So this week's episode, I am getting we have been working towards from the last few weeks, and it's the feeling of resentment that I assume most of us have felt at some point. And if you haven't felt this, especially as a housewife, I hope you never do, but more than likely you probably will. So I don't want to be pessimistic or negative. I'm just being very realistic today, and so if you haven't felt it, if you've been married for 100 years and you've never felt this, then really awesome on you. But for those of us that have or are potentially going through it right now, the last few weeks have definitely been leading up to it, because I wanted to first introduce what type of housewife we are, so that we kind of get working in our head of what our vision of taking care of our home and our family looks like. Then those feelings of inadequacy, I feel like a lot of times, or at least personally for me, those feelings of inadequacy, when they're not dealt with properly, tend to lead into resentment. And then you have last week where we talked about what are your housewife roles, what are your partner's expectations, where's the line, right? Where does your housewife job end and your partnership begin? And I wanted to bring that because if those sorts of things aren't being dealt with and handled properly as well, I think that we can tend to get resentment feelings out of those different scenarios too. So this whole month has really been leading up to these last two episodes, and I just hope that you guys have been thinking about a lot of stuff and been able to sort anything out that you might have been dealing with. I've been going through a roller coaster of emotions, working on a lot of this myself, and it's really hard, and it's not an easy thing to go through. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there first. So anyways, before we get too far into the conversation, let's grab our beverages of choice, whatever time of day it is for you and whatever that time of day calls for. I am sipping on some iced coffee today, so anyways, cheers guys, let's have some fun. I think the last feeling that any of us housewives want is the feeling of resentment. And just to kind of lay it out there and understand specifically what I'm talking about, it's, that bad feeling, that ugly feeling that you have where you're kind of mad at your partner, you're angry with them, but there's not really any specific reason to why you're mad at them. You can come up with a bunch of reasons, well, you pissed me off here and there, but nothing ever feels resolved. And it's definitely a deep festering feeling. It feels evil, at least to me. It does not feel good. It makes me feel very bitter, I guess is another kind of way to describe it. And and I'm going to get into my experience here in a minute, but it sneaks up on you. Most of the time, you're just angry and grumpy and cranky for, God knows what, and nothing feels like it's getting resolved. The whole world feels like it's against you. And, you have these like little negative voices in your head, like, telling you like you should be mad because your husband didn't take the garbage out and you moved to Okinawa for him. Like it's those sorts of signs that you're like, okay, that's not a proper reaction to him forgetting to take the garbage out. Like, and you can't have those arguments when there's something going on. It's really bad in a marriage to continue to bring up past things, or things that you've given up, or things that you've done, right? So I think that it's supernatural for, not supernatural, but it's natural for anyone to feel resentment in any sort of scenario. But specifically to us housewives, I think that it's a feeling, like I mentioned earlier, that most of us will probably kind of feel at some point. And a lot of that has to do with like just how our society is made up. And, from kind of what I've seen, a lot of people that end up being housewives, it wasn't, they had a job beforehand, or, they became a housewife out of necessity and they're trying to embrace it. There's lots of different sort of scenarios, or even if you did decide that like your whole life you've been waiting to be a housewife, like there, our expectations versus our reality aren't always going to match up. And so what we think this role is going to look like and what we want it to look like and what it ends up looking like can all be different things. And all of this can lead to feelings of resentment. So, resentment brings out like some really uncomfortable feelings and some really odd behaviors. And those behaviors and all of that are going to show up differently in us. So it's hard for me to say like how resentment is going to show up in your life, or potentially show up in your life. I'm going to explain in my scenario how it showed up, and maybe that can help you guys pinpoint any sort of things that you've been feeling. But we all have just different things going on, and so we're going to be using different excuses and get upset about different things and all of that, right? So moving to Okinawa was the first time that I felt, in the almost 4 years at that point of us being married, any sort of resentment or bad feeling. And it was weird because we had lived in Alabama for 3 years. But what I realized through a lot of my reflection is that I was totally like suspended in time when we lived in Alabama. Like, looking back on it now, like, yes, I was doing things, but it really feels like my life was on pause those 3 years. And we were just trying to make the best out of a scenario that neither one of us wanted to be in. I've shared with you guys, my husband did not want to go on recruiting duty, and that was very challenging for him. And, I didn't mind moving to Alabama, but, getting taken away from my career and, trying to be in this new housewife role and all of that, that took a lot of adjustment for me, a lot more than I expected it to. So, moving to Okinawa, I was like extremely excited because I just felt like, okay, our life is going to unpause now and it's going to continue forward, and it has in a very significant way to me anyways. So what happened is, like, first of all, when we first got here, we hadn't even been here, I think, a full month. Maybe we've been here a month, and then he finds out that he has to go on this like 2.5 week detachment right before Christmas. And that one threw me because our housing wasn't even here yet. We had gotten like our express shipment, but like other than like all of our stuff wasn't here. So then I had to like deal with that on my own when he was gone. Um, but it was just all of a sudden like I was in full blown military wife scenario, and I hadn't really experienced that. I had experienced a tough duty with him, which is something in itself that's really hard, but I hadn't had a lot of these other military wife experiences yet. So, that was like I'm barely adjusted to living in a new country, and trying to figure out like living on base. I've never done that before. Like, there's just so many new things, and then it's like, boom, you're gone. And logically, I understand that's not his fault, right? Like, that's just his job. And that was one thing coming here and in anywhere we were going, knowing coming off recruiting duty, that wherever we would be going, he would be having deployments, he would be having these, like, 2 to 3 a month long detachments, things like that. Um, Before I married him, I had those thoughts. I had prepared myself that, like, he is going to be taken away for, months at a time potentially when we get married. And, like, while he's still having a career in the Marine Corps, am I going to be okay with that? And I decided that, yes, I would be okay with that. But thinking about that and not experiencing it are two different things. And it's difficult. And so, here I am on top of just trying to get used to all these other things. Um, Now I'm alone. And, he's off on his job. And so it's like I have a country to get used to, I have a new way of living to get used to, and now I have to get used to the fact that my husband leaves quite often. And so, I started feeling like kind of bitter about stuff like that. And then thoughts started creeping into my head like, this fucking sucks because here I am, like, now even further away from Hollywood. I kind of recognized that my life unpaused. So life is starting to move ahead again. I'm doing the whole like age time thing in my head, and I'm getting upset because now we're going to be here for 3 years, and that's going to put me at 35 by the time, if we even can get back to the West Coast to potentially get and stuff. So like my head is just like spiraling at this point, right? And I'm alone, like and so I'm just like, this fucking sucks. Like, this isn't what I expected. And it's, again, logically, I knew all of this. I knew all of it. But knowing it and living it were just two different things. And they all just kind of came together in this perfect storm moment. And I just started getting really bitter and really resentful. I was resentful to his career, that he got to have something that was fulfilling and gave him a lot of pride and meaning in his life. The fact that he enjoys doing those things. And again, like, the good, nice side of me is happy for all of that, right? And I think that's one thing that feels really weird when we have these feelings of resentment, is that, like, there are aspects of you that are bitter and angry and happy and glad at the same time. And you're just like, it's really confusing because you're like, oh, I'm not being resentful. I'm not having, like, I'm okay. Because when you're, having sane, logical moments, you are happy for your spouse, right? You want nothing but the best for them. But then it's those dark moments that take you, somewhere else, and or they can even like coexist. And so, like, in my personal experience, like, I was so happy that he was getting to do Marine Corps shit, because like the last 3 years he didn't get to do that, and he really misses that aspect of his job. I'm happy he likes his job. Like, I'm happy that it's all of that. But then at the same time, I was really upset and sad for me that, like, I don't have any sense of belonging to anything other than my marriage. And, I don't even have, like, my stuff here. Like, I just felt so, I don't know, like kind of empty and just like totally meaningless and like pretty much the exact opposite of what I saw for him. And so I did really start feeling resentful in that moment. Mentally, like I'd said, I tried to prepare for all of this and all of this change, but it just happened really quickly. And so, like, part of my resentment and my feelings towards him, I kept a lot of it to myself, which I don't recommend doing. I'm not gonna like tell you how to handle this sort of stuff in your life. I think again, all of us have to figure it out. But for me personally, like when I have festering feelings of, just negative, not nice feelings, it's good for me to get it out towards my husband. And so I eventually was just like, getting frustrated with myself that here I am living on this like beautiful island. I'm not taking a lot of advantage of it, and I'm like getting mad and nitpicking at him for stupid stuff. And so, he eventually, like, I meet up with him in Tokyo for Christmas. We had fun. We come back, and then it's like January is really when things kind of started kind of making a boiling point, I guess. So he's back at this point, but then we find out that he's going to be going to Yuma for 2 months. And that was not great to hear. So now I'm like, okay, now I have to mentally prepare for that again. We don't have friends, like, just all these things, right? And so I'm like recognizing in myself that, like, I'm just getting mad for no reason. And then I was also withholding affection from him. And so, which is not like something that we do. Like, we're very affectionate with one another. So I didn't like that I was doing that. And those were some signs to me because I have kind of like in my nature to do self reflection anyways. And when I'm feeling negative and bad, I do take a step back and say, like, okay, why are you feeling this way? Like, what's going on? And I realized then that, oh, this is all resentment. This is what this is. So once I recognized that that was that feeling, and my husband had said so many times throughout our marriage, like, I just, you making these choices to come and do this stuff with me, like, I just don't want you to wake up one day and resent me. And he has said that so many times. And I've always been like, oh, don't worry about it, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. And then, not long after we get here, I'm having this conversation with him, and I'm just like, yeah, so I'm actually feeling resentful to you now. And he was like, shit, this is what I was afraid of. And I was like, no, it's okay. And what I've realized, which is not probably what anyone wants to hear, but when I finally realized that, okay, this is resentment, I was like, this has everything to do with me. This is nothing to do with you. And so I think, like, most of the time when you're having, I think if you're having resentful feelings, and this again is my take on it, I think that you are 100% having issues with yourself. Yes, your spouse can make your life harder, right? Like, yes, if you're going through a rough patch and they're not putting in their end of the work, or, they're asking you to do things that you don't want to do and they're not being flexible, like, there's a whole bunch of different scenarios, right, that can, like, make you mad at your spouse. But I think when we get mad at someone that we love, we eventually move on from it, right? We have our fight, we have our argument, and then you move on with your life. Resentment is when we don't move on. We say we move on. In that moment, you might be like, okay, like if it's something dumb, like you broke my favorite glass, okay? Like, okay, I'm going to be mad at you for a minute, but then I'm going to move on. Resentment is like, okay, you broke my favorite glass. Okay, I'm not mad about you breaking the glass anymore, but I'm still mad at you. And potentially while you're having that fight, whatever that resentful feeling might come out within the fight. So it's not just that you broke my glass, but you made me, and this isn't necessarily a fight we had, but just to give you an example, like, you made me move across the world to Okinawa, and I'm sitting at home by myself now, and you just broke my fucking favorite glass. It's like, Okay, yes, I broke your favorite glass, but what does all that other stuff have to do with it? Well, I'm already unhappy, and you now made me even more unhappy. Like that's what that stuff leads to. And the thing is that we make all these choices, right? We've decided to be in this relationship with this person, and you have to embrace whatever is thrown your way, even when it's not easy and when it's not comfortable. And it's easy to say, embrace the change, embrace the scenarios, embrace whatever is going on. It's not easy to actually do it. And so for me, I found that having the conversation with him and, talking to him about what I was feeling resentful about and explain to him that, this isn't your problem, this is my problem, but it's going to take me a while to figure out. But I just want you to know why my behavior is being odd. I want you to know that, like, I don't want to be this way. I don't want to think this way. I don't want to, withhold affection from you. I don't want to, be jealous of you and your career. I don't want to, be sitting here thinking, like, what am I missing out on if I was still there? Like, I don't want to have these thoughts and feelings. So I'm telling you this in hopes that, like, maybe even just me telling you can help kind of figure some of this out and put things in perspective, but also so that you know mentally what I'm going through when I'm having a bad day, or when you break my favorite glass and I freak out and overreact. It's not obviously just the glass, and you know what that is. And so I think that really helped for us, because he could feel what was going on. He didn't, necessarily know that I was having this resentment towards him, but he knew something was up because my behavior was odd. And so it made him feel a lot better. It made me feel a lot better. And it actually helped me, like, work through a lot of the stuff that I've been dealing with. I know it can be hard to hear that, like, this is your problem. And especially it might sound kind of weird when we'll take my scenario as an example. Like, I did actually choose to go to Okinawa with, like, my husband, and I had that conversation. We could have gone somewhere else, but honestly, I probably would have had some level of resentment feeling at some point, unless we had moved to California again. But even then, it would have still been really hard to work in Hollywood with where they're stationed at. So it wouldn't have been a perfect scenario. I think that because I was on mentally on pause in Alabama, I just wasn't dealing with a lot of feelings, and I was figuring some things out, but I wasn't figuring out other things. And so I think this feeling would have eventually come to a head. But a lot of it is my problem because, like, I chose to be married to this person. So I think when, we have entered into relationships and marriages and stuff, even though I don't necessarily have control over where my husband's job is going to take us, or what his schedule is going to look like I really don't have any control at all. That was like, I've been dealing with that the last month. But it's, and that's a whole other conversation. But anyways, I don't have, like, control over any of this sort of situation. But like I always say, I have control over myself and how I react to things and how I emotionally handle things. And, letting resentment come into my life that way was not me handling it the way that I needed to. And so, yeah, I don't make those choices, but I made the choice to marry somebody in this scenario. So I think it's like, when we decide to marry someone, yeah, sometimes things pop up that, we didn't know were there, or, like, our expectations, like, reality is different than what our expectations were, and it might throw you a little bit. But that's where you have to come back and be like, well, I married this person. Like, this is a partnership. And so, to feel bitter and resentful about anything that's going on like this is not really in anyone's favor. It just makes the scenario worse. So you really got to look at your situation and kind of figure out like how you're going to overcome it. There's not always a solution, and that's in my scenario. I don't have a solution. All I can do is just change my perspective, and that is one of the hardest things to do, because a part of me is like, I kind of have to change my personality a little bit because I'm a control freak in certain ways. It's really hard for me, and reality of it is being less of a control freak is a great thing. Like, the way I needed to control things before were not good. Like, nobody should feel like that all the time. So, all of this is very still much positive, but it's just still really hard work. And so the antidote to all of this, and, again, like you choosing to be in this marriage, is unconditional love. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. So I'm not going to get too much into that. But the way, at least for myself, that I was able to overcome a lot of these bad feelings, and what I have to continue to remind myself, because resentment tried to sneak in again this last month, and I realized where I was headed, and I was starting to get a little bit bitter, and I'm like, no, we're not going there again. And I had to remind myself about unconditional love, and that I'm married to somebody, and I've made vows and promises. And so and not like I was like, oh, I'm gonna get divorced or anything like that. It was not that. It was not to that level. But it was just like you almost have to, in your head, like, well, we'll get into it with unconditional love. We'll get into all of this. But I just wanted to talk about this feeling first, because it takes time. Like, it was not overnight that I was like, oh yeah, I'm feeling resentful. That's why I'm like this. Hey honey, I'm feeling resentful. Let's talk about it. Like, this was seriously probably weeks, maybe more like months, few months of really struggling with some of these feelings, and then realizing what they were. Then more months of working on, not having these feelings, and not allowing myself to, think about, like, let my emotions get the best of me and feel sorry for myself, and, all of that. Like, all of that stuff comes with it, right? And so, I just wanted to kind of bring this up before we get into unconditional love, so that you guys can have a little bit of time to kind of reflect and think to yourself, like, oh yeah, I am being kind of angry right now, and I don't really know why. I have been like a little bitter. I have had, my patience has been low, like any little thing like that. I've been withholding affection, like any sort of feelings like that. Just think about where they're coming from, and especially if they're long term. If it's just like a few days and then you're feeling a lot better, then that's probably not resentment. But if this has been going on for a few weeks or a few months, then there's definitely something there that you need to like kind of explore and be like, okay, why am I like this? Because I don't know about you guys, but I personally do not like feeling like that. It makes everything a lot more difficult, and it just makes everything seem a lot worse than it is. It's hard to enjoy time together with your spouse. It's hard to like just have fun and let loose, because it's just constantly in the back of your mind, whatever you have going on, right? So, my feelings are just constantly like swirl in my head, and maybe you're a little different than I am, but a lot of that stuff, even if we're not like consciously thinking about it, could be provoking how we react to things, or making our experiences certain ways where they could be different, they could be better, right? So anyways, I am actually going to wrap it up now. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Again, if you've never had resentment feeling, great. But this could be in so many different scenarios. It's not just with a husband and wife. It could be with your family, your friends, your coworkers if you do work. This can manifest in so many different ways, and so it just doesn't lead us down to a nice road. Usually, if you don't handle it, it gets out of control, right? And you end up doing something that maybe you wish you hadn't. So it's really good that when you start feeling these sorts of things, to just really take the time to reflect on them and sort of figure out where they're coming from, and then see how you can get a handle of your emotions. And then, like we'll talk about next week, like unconditional love is probably not going to relate to like a coworker scenario, but there's other ways that it might relate that you could kind of work on it. But yeah, and this feeling can creep up again. Like I said, I just had gotten over it, and then here I am, like within this last month, and it's creeping in again, and I'm dealing with a whole new batch of feelings and things. And it's like, I mean, part of it is probably because I haven't fully accepted some things. So I still need to work on fully accepting those things. But I would like to, and I would like to get to a point of like accepting that, I might not be a writer, I might not be a director, and that's okay. I can write and do my own thing at home, and, being creative in that way really should be it, right? Being creative for the sake of fame and glory, like I've talked to you guys about, doesn't benefit me anymore. So, I need to figure out how I can stretch my creative muscles and do all of that, and just be okay if my screenplay sits on my computer and nobody reads it. And then, just being okay being the housewife. Like I have embraced a lot more of that role, but there's still definitely something there that I just doesn't quite click. So anyways, all stuff that I'm working on, but I hope I've inspired you guys today and given you some things to talk about. I hope my scenario was relatable and gave you something to think about for your own life, because I really want to help people not feel this way. I think this is the thing that breaks marriages. I think when they last, not, and again, if it's like been a few weeks or a few months, you're okay. It's when these sorts of feelings stretch on for years and years, and they never go, you know, treated, I guess. They never get figured out. They're never, you've never taken the time to think about it, and it's like 3 years, into your marriage, and it's like, oh, fuck, like, sometimes stuff can get too out of hand, right? So, and then, like I said, this feeling creates behaviors. It creates behaviors that we don't even like ourselves, right? Like I said, I don't want to withhold affection from my husband. I love giving him hugs and kisses. And so it's like, you know, not doing that, like, makes me sad. Like, I don't like it. So it just creates more and more things, right? So, again, just hope to give you guys something to think about. And then next week, we'll talk about unconditional love. And I think it's a great antidote and something that's, really helpful to think about when you're dealing with these sorts of things. So, anyways, thank you guys so much for joining me for another week's episode. Please like, comment, subscribe, and check out my website. Again, if you're enjoying this content, share with a friend. I would love to continue to build our community. If you're part of the community and you're loving it, just let me know. I would love to hear from you guys. And if you have any topic discussions relating to philosophy or housewives, let me know. It would be cool to hear some things that you guys want to talk about, and if you care for my opinions on. So anyways, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and cheers. I'll see you soon. Bye.